Welcome. We are excited to be here, and I'm very excited to be here with this wonderful panel addressing an issue that I think a lot of people are talking about, a lot of companies are grappling with, and some very, very courageous companies are taking some serious risks with. So with that said, I'd like to have my panelists introduce themselves, and then we're going to get started. Janine?
Give it a start. Good afternoon. My name is Janine Liebert. I head up marketing and communications and corporate social responsibility for BET Networks, which is part of Viacom.
My name is Tiuglo. I work at Google in the Creative Lab. I'm based in Sydney. I do global projects working at the intersection of technology and culture.
I'm Sil Saller. I'm the CMO of Diageo. We're a big drinks company, and despite the accent, I'm based in London.
I am Sırma Umur, and I lead brand building for Procter & Gamble. And actually, I think we are going to start with a little film from my company.
The company's film on risk-taking. So let's roll
From
the
a
video.
brand, yeah.
Are we all born the same? Do we share the same dreams? What is expected of us? Will love always be carefree? Through whose eyes do we see ourselves? Do we have an expiry date? And if we haven't ticked all the right boxes, are we worth less after turning 30? Or can things be different? Can we decide for ourselves? Who we are? Who we aspire to be? What really matters? And the messages we pass on to others. Can we change destiny by changing our thoughts?
Very, very powerful video. And it's a powerful video that came about in a very interesting way and really addresses a story that you felt that needed to be told in one area of the world and ended up being relevant in many others. So would you, Seema, address a little bit of the background on how that came to be and what the risk was in Procter & Gamble taking that on?
Okay, we believe, actually, we see that the brand, when the brand fights for a right cause and the brand has the right ethics and morals and fights for gender equality, we always see that our consumers come back and reward us for it. So actually, we always try to make sure that our advertising shows women in the context that we want them to be. And in China, we did a lot of things like this. So for example, for the woman who passed a certain age, there is something called the marriage market. So parents put the girls' names and what they do and their income on a marketplace. And then men and parents of men can come and see. And so we are going in to defy this process, that this is, and it is a long-standing cultural stance, but we are going in and saying it is not wrong, women should stand for themselves. And now we look at it and we say, okay, it is China, it is very different, but really, it is not that different. I mean, no one puts my name on a marriage market, but my very progressive mom still has dreams of me getting married. And it is like, no, thank you, mom, I am married, I have a good job, I have a child, I am in a good position, I'm not married, and it's fine. So it happens everywhere. So I think here what the brand is trying to do is actually to get a conversation going. And I think that is very important because when a brand gets a conversation going, it is good for the brand because if the conversation is going towards where we feel the responsibility to take it towards. It does have risks because, of course, you are shaking some norms of the marketplace, but we believe the benefit outweighs the risk because every time the women come back rewarding us. And therefore, we believe it is the right thing to do because it is definitely right because we sell more at the end of it. And when we sell more at the end of it, because women come back rewarding us, and we sell more, it is good for our business, and then it creates the virtuous cycle that we go on and on doing what we believe is the right thing to do.
And you have to have leadership's buy-in at the top to be able to take those types of risks because they're not inexpensive. If this had the risk of alienating the mothers who are asking the questions, right? The aunties who, when you walk in and you're 33 years old and you're not married and ask you, when are you getting married and is there anyone you're thinking about having, as your husband, they could potentially be offended. A company that took a risk similar to that, where they're really expressing their value system, is Nike, who did that recently. And that could have alienated 40%, 50% of their audience. But they were willing to take that risk to express their values. And T, on the creative side, how do you see companies taking those risks and how are they demonstrating?
Well, I think Nike is a very good example. It's like it was very visibly a risk, and we had some applause in the audience. I think that was for Nike, unless someone just felt like clapping. It was really demonstrable that they knew that they were going to upset people. But what we're really talking about here are value systems, and actually, what we have within the advertising community is a kind of direct line into the hearts and minds of the world. And we have to think about the value systems that we are establishing, because we do not get to simply have the right idea. Things that might seem absolutely correct and right to us are right because that's what we believe. We don't have a right. This is a big problem for the tech firms, because we don't have a right to tell the world how they should feel. We don't have any kind of established kind of mandate to vet what is true and what is untrue, what is correct and what is incorrect speech or representation. But we can look at one of the spaces that we can do that is how we tell our own stories, how brands tell their own stories. So over and over again, I think it's very sort of, I was on the Glass jury at Cannes this year, which is an advertising festival which celebrates kind of the best creativity, and the Glass Lion is awarded to advertising which is pushing gender boundaries and doing exactly the sort of things that we're talking about here. And you can see that that work is beginning to happen. It can happen more. I mean, gender is just the very first of many intersections that we need to address. That's really the challenge in front of us, is having the courage to take that risk, to stand up for our values.
Absolutely. And it's not only having the courage, but having the responsibility, because as media and as advertisers, what is the responsibility that you have to articulate and demonstrate how girls see themselves, how women see themselves?
I mean, the danger is that the responsibility is to the shareholder. And the shareholder is actually not that interested in how girls see themselves. It is a very important distinction that when you talk to companies, you understand who they are responsible to. They are not responsible to society. So it is actually extraordinary when we see big brands, P&G and Diageo, like actually genuinely, and all of these companies genuinely taking a stand, even though it theoretically might hurt their bottom line.
If I may say on that one, our responsibility is to the shareholder, and that's true, and we talk about shareholder value all the time. But this one does build shareholder value, is our experience, and I think that's where you were going to, right? It does build shareholder value, because the more we do it, we, for example, with our Always program, we educate girls in Africa. That builds economy. Economy building does add to shareholder value. So we support other programs that supports economy, it helps our business. So this actually is a system that keeps on feeding itself. And I think that's where you were going. And I think it's very important for the sustainability of these programs.
So in order to be sustainable, it has to benefit the bottom line.
I think it has to benefit the bottom line, because otherwise I will be interested and I will run it, but then one day somebody will stop it because they only care about the bottom line. But the beauty of this is because when we open everything, the supply system to the women, the directors to women, we all of a sudden multiply the talent by 2. And then, of course, you get a better talent pool and everything starts improving. It will inevitably always help the bottom line, so it will keep on going all the time.
Great. Janine, at BET, how do you exemplify and take responsibility for the images that you portray of young women?
Well, there's a couple different things in this conversation made me think of 2 things before I get to that point. I mean, one, I think just going to the shareholder point is from a creative side, and particularly in the United States, and even more so obviously on a global perspective, there's a browning of America. So if your company doesn't reflect kind of the wide color range and gender transitions that are happening, you can't win from a creative side, because it's all about telling authentic stories. And so if you're not telling authentic stories created by people who are being themselves, you're not going to win. So at BET, 2 of the things we've done are create 2 different programs, one with Paramount Players called Project Create, where we're giving $1 million for someone who has not done any other film to do a feature film. So we're really excited about that. And we've also partnered with Issa Rae. She has an organization called The Color Creative, and we're doing a script-to-screen project with her, where we're getting scripts from writers who are fresh, with fresh ideas, and she is helping us bring them directly to the screen. So for us, it's about, obviously we're industry players. We've been doing this for over 30 years, almost nearly 40 actually. And so we are always taking great care to work with Hollywood and work with everywhere that we can. But for us, it's really about nurturing new talent and getting fresh ideas and really working with people who can help us open doors. Because we realize even though we're a big brand, we still need the help of younger people who are doing things, who have a different perspective, who may be in a different physical space. We have a whole international team. So we work with our BET Paris, our BET Africa. They give us ideas. So it's really about being really broad in the way we approach all of our programming and creating new programming.
Great. That sounds a little bit like the initiative that, T, you were speaking about earlier.
I want Sil to speak. You can talk to this. Do you want to?
Well, why don't we hold free the bid, and I really want to talk about what we're talking about, because I think it's a fascinating question around this question of who do we serve and risk. So I think increasingly companies understand that they serve many stakeholders, and shareholders are just one of them. Employees are massively important, and they care. We know this statistically. So I think there is a range, and I think you've made the point that that what's good for the brand is often what's good for consumers, which is what's good for shareholders. Let's not forget women make most decisions on buying, and therefore we know that if 65% of women will turn off an ad if they don't think it portrays them in the way they think they should be portrayed. So there's alignment there. On this issue of risk, I think it's really interesting. I think when you see a company like Nike take that kind of a risk, I was sort of like, wow. Happy. It happens to align with my value systems, happens to align with what I believe in, and I was like, wow. And then their stock dropped. And I immediately rang somebody I knew at Nike. Not immediately, I gave it 2 weeks, and I said, please tell me sales are up. I can't say what he said, but I was happy with the answer. And so I think that's a real risk, right? That's a real risk. Mega brand, you're taking a stand on a very big issue in a very divided country. A lot of other risks, I think the risks exist in our heads as leaders more than they exist with the consumer. And we should take them. People are worried about what their boss is going to think. They're worried that there's going to be some bad press. Yeah, there's going to be bad press. I mean, we did, for International Women's Day with Johnny Walker, we made Johnny Walker Jane Walker. We did that with the most amazing intent, which was to give money to monumental women, to erect statues in Central Park, because guess what? There aren't any of women, and we did it to raise money for She Will Run. Now, some people like that. Some commentators didn't like that. We took the risk. I called the brand manager, the woman who ran that, who I know would just be going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, as she's reading, you know, the Twitter scroll, and I said, it's fine, do not worry. Because Johnny Walker is going to celebrate its 200th anniversary in 2020, and I think the brand's going to be around from another century. One risk does not hurt a brand, and if we just took more of them, we would realize that. So for me, a lot of this is really thinking about leadership in what's the risk in your head versus really what's the risk out there.
And this is new. It used to be that the last thing companies wanted to do was anything that was risky.
But there's such a sea change. I mean, if you are, I mean, we're going to talk about progressive gender portrayal. If you keep portraying women in the old ways, people will leave your brand. We know this now. So that's why, for me, it doesn't feel that risky. And I think that we are at a tipping point. I mean, I'm going to talk about gender just because that's more the topic of this, but I am talking about all kinds of diversity. I think we're at a tipping point, and I think if we as business leaders, with our billions and billions that we spend, don't work to tip it over, we have a problem.
I just wanted to make one point about risks. It's typically when companies take risks and they don't have the right people in the room, that sometimes that's when the risk goes a little left. So I think part of being a risk-taking company and having a forward-thinking type of company is making sure that your employees, your team, everyone understands the values, and that you have the broadest representation of people in the room. So it sounds like the woman who came up with that campaign certainly had a larger worldview. And then, of course, having the leadership to support you to say, you know, it's okay, like take a breath, don't stress over Twitter, because, of course, we all know there's pain and joy to be found in your Twitter timeline.
I think that's completely true. I mean, I underestimating the power of having a diverse team and a supportive CEO, who, by the way, also called her. You know, I'd love to tell you that Diageo has always been the most diverse company in the world up until 2006. For a company that has brands that many are centuries old, there was one woman on all of our boards and our legacy companies. Our board, our executive board, is now 40% women. The marketing leadership team is 45% women. It can change, and that's just in the last 5 years, and it changes the conversation overnight.
Yeah, it is worth applauding. It's it is one of the things that we are seeing, because it's easier to see, is this kind of change, like leadership change, senior level change. One of the things that's much harder to see are the structural changes that we need in order to literally subvert the supply mechanism that, and I think we've actually all referenced it. I think I'm going to be a little bit more explicit. There are, so I'm trans and queer and neurodiverse and have mental health issues. I'm basically like a tick box for all of the things that you need on your panel. It's probably why I'm here. It is very important that it is not simply about visibility. It is not simply about representing. It is about equity for those intersections. That women still are considered in this category is extraordinary to me, but it is. And certainly within advertising, certainly within filmmaking and producing and directing, we are fine on female producers. People who kind of dot the I's and cross the T's. They're in plentiful supply. The directors and in creative directors and the egos apparently seems to be much smaller. Well, it's not apparently, this is statistical. 3% is a conference that's been working to build the number of creative directors, i.e. senior creative people in advertising, from 3%. I think they're now at somewhere like 11% for America, which is terrific, right? But that's like 1 in 10 creative directors involved in these processes. Within filmmaking, we've had this massive issue in just the way in which the way in which it is structured is that directors pitch in, or agencies will go out to get pitches for the work. And they are getting pitches from normally 3 directors, and those 3 directors are normally male. Mm-hmm. So there's a group called Free the Bid, and they have been working on this at a structural level to go to all of the brands and say, don't accept it if there's not a woman being pitched, if 1/3 of that is not female. And that, in turn, shifts the whole playing field. Because when the brands, the people with the money, the people who are buying, demand something, when there is demand, we create supply. The people selling to that will create supply. So funnily enough, amazingly, they are able to find women, suddenly, magically. And more importantly, if they can't find the women that they want, they go out and look for them. And more importantly, the schools suddenly are there going, well, we know that this demand is here. And the talent agencies know that the demand is there. So it is through doing something very, very structural, making a very specific demand. And that scales across industries. I'm not sure how your industries are structured, but wherever you see that kind of invisible inequity, it is possible to do that. And that is coming from a very small group of women.
Yeah, I would actually love to talk on Free the Bid, because we are also working with them. And if you look at our company, we have 45% of our management women. But then, when you look at our advertising, very little % of our advertising was directed by women. And now, with Free the Bid, we are also starting to use more and more directors in our movies. And actually, the directors in the filmmaking in advertising is so impactful, because let's not forget, the directors do the casting. So, for example, in one of our advertising, and maybe you know the brand Venus. Venus, to us, is like, It is women coming out of the sea with white bikinis and perfect bodies, and they tend to be blonde. And actually, in a bid to change this advertising, because we decided we are going to go for the change and we are going to make this right, and we tried to change the Venus brand. And actually, one of the most important things was to change the director to a woman. Right now, we actually have women that are really, truly natural. They have skin diseases, you know, this pigmentation disease, they have tattoos, they do not have the perfect bodies, and they're not really wearing bikinis. But actually, making the change to a woman director really impacted the whole process a lot. And this is the commitment. This is the commitment that needs to be behind any brand.
I have another really small example compared to that one, but we have put in place what we call our progressive gender portrayal framework, and this is a way of looking at our advertising. We started by kind of evaluating where we were, and it was pretty good, but not very. And so now we view things through 4 lenses. We do share this framework pretty openly. My boss said, so I think portraying people in a more realistic and progressive way is a competitive advantage. Why are you sharing it with the world? And the answer is because that's how we think we can make the biggest difference. And oh, by the way, we think that we'll just have a little more flair in doing it right. So I don't think I'm giving away the world. And I won't bore you with the framework, but it looks not only for the big things, like the kind of diversity and naturalness you might be talking about, the creativity that you're talking about, but the small things. And the small example is on our brand Bailey's. We hired a woman director whose name is Chloe Bailey, no relation. She's a French director. And she just brought a unbelievably fresh perspective to every element of these really simple films. And in drinks, we have what's called the sip shot. And the sip shot through a straw, now it is a paper straw or, you know, not a plastic straw, because we're signed up to sustainability. You know, she saw the person do that, and she did it in what a very sexualized manner. And she was like, no, 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 not like that, not like that. And it is those little things that make something feel fresh and modern and non-stereotyped. And it's that I think makes your brand more appealing.
To more people.
To more people.
I think we're going to set up the next video.
Yeah, it's we use the framework to look at all of our advertising so that we get the small things right. In some of our work, we make specific statements about women, and I think we're seeing a lot of great work from P&G in that space as well. We make that work as well, and this is a piece of work from our brand Guinness, which has a reputation for doing epic, iconic advertising. Interestingly, the award I am most proud of for Guinness, the Creativity Award, is the one that T just talked about, the Glass Lion, for telling the story of Gareth Thomas, who it was the first rugby player to come out as gay. And when you take Guinness, a traditionally masculine brand, and you show the masculine, the human side, the diverse side, the vulnerable side, that is the thing that I'm proudest of. In this case, this ad, it's very simple. It tells the story of Gail, who becomes a female football player. And if I showed this as a US ad, you'd go, right, interesting still, but women's soccer's really big in the US, so, you know, who cares? Women playing soccer is not big in the countries in sub-Saharan Africa where we show this work, what this work is designed for. And, you know, Guinness is a beer of character that stands for people of character. And very simply, we just wanted to tell her story.
Great. Let's roll the video.
They call me Lioness. I was always different, the rebel. I was the only girl playing football with 20 guys. They say, boy, girl, you need to play with girls. But I didn't care. My father was sick. The last thing he told me before he died, your father here now. It's big responsibility. When I'm in the pitch, I say, this is the moment. Nothing can stop me. Football is not just only for men. It's my passion. It made me strong. It made me who I am today. I am girl Enganamwit. I am made of black.
Wow. Wow. That was really powerful.
For me, the most moving line in that is, I am who I am today. And, you know, we're going to, I apologize if I end up using a lot of corporate speak in talking about this, but for me, this is really just about enabling all of us to be who we are, because it is exhausting to be somebody else.
It is so refreshing.
I just got like a full body chill, and I saw it yesterday, and I still got a full body chill. It's just an amazing piece of content, and it really shows when you tell a story that says anything so much more about your brand than anything else you could have said in any way. We're all going to get Guinness right after this panel.
And it demonstrates that we are making progress. We are making progress, and being in the fight and trying to push the ball forward. Sometimes it gets lost that these types of ads wouldn't have happened 5-10 years ago. So we're making progress. We've got a long way to go, but we just still have to keep pushing. And some of the very, very brave companies are willing to be industry leaders and lead the way in taking those risks and making those changes.
I just want to say one thing on that point, but I still think, to your point about the director's piece, that is where you have to push even further, because I think, particularly in the US, this year was the first year that you had more diverse casts in the fall slate than you had non-diverse casts. So the first time ever to have that switch. So clearly, from a financial perspective, all the networks are understanding that if we don't have casts that reflect what's happening in the world, what's happening in the country, we're not going to get the ratings, thus we're not going to. So, but if you look behind the scenes and you look at the directors and you look at kind of the corporate side, it doesn't match what you see on the face. So it's really, having a 2-score sheet of here's all the stories that we're going to tell, but we really have to keep our eye on the prize of how are we creating and developing those people, to your point, who are making those casting decisions and making all of the decisions that follow from a director's perspective. Sorry.
So that's a perfect segue, I think, except for we're going to segue right to tea. Okay. I want us to come out of this with some action items of what we can do to continue to move forward. And I'd like to have each of you suggest and make a suggestion about what you think a priority action item would be to get to the next step. T?
Oh, good. It's always difficult to tell people to go away and do something. I think that, and it has come up a lot, this idea that what we're talking about here is practical actions, but what we're talking about is mythology. We're talking about basically changing the value systems of the world through our little actions. That's a very challenging thing to try and achieve on your own. Me Too was a classic storytelling exercise which changed a sensation of how we understand sexual harassment. We have, on our own, plenty of potential to do these things. I think the one thing that people can do is remember that it is through small groups at grassroots that we make change. It's actually if we had longer to talk about the number of different spaces in which is affecting our world, it's actually coming from small pressure groups led by women who care. And their brands are ruthless. We're very happy to sort of abrogate and use passion when we find it. So it's really important that we create passion for brands to tell stories around. One of the funniest things about Google, I just wanted to say, one of the most interesting things for me in the last few years at Google has been watching Google realize that their doodle, the logo, reinforces the idea that famous people are often male. This is about 5, 8, maybe 10 years ago. And slowly but surely, we have been making sure that that is much more representative. To a point where you're there going, who is this woman? I've never heard of her. And then you have to think, oh, there's probably a reason. There's probably a reason I haven't heard of her. And now I've heard of her. And she's amazing. So there are little places. That, again, comes from small individuals within an organization. The female emojis was, so if you ever wondered or ever noticed, a couple of years ago, there was suddenly a raft of female emojis, so that all the builders weren't male and the doctors weren't male. It took someone to notice that, and to care about it, and to fight, until it becomes something which everyone is like, that's absurd, why on earth are we doing that? So that's my thing, really, is for each individual to go back and look at your world and question it. And if you see something that's wrong, to fight for that change in whatever structure you work in.
Thank you.
I guess I look at it on two levels. I am really happy to see the industry, business, the big branded companies, starting to come together and to do the right thing through Free the Bid, the Unstereotype Alliance, the WFA, sharing our frameworks. I think we were all moved to action by the fact that when we met at Cannes in 2017, we understood that despite our good intentions, up until then, we had not moved the dial on progressive gender portrayal at all. And we learned a lot in working with the Gina Davis Institute to understand that. But I do want to really reinforce what you said. I think each of us has so much more power within us than we know. And sometimes we come to conferences like this, and I know I'm always looking at the stage. I was watching you earlier and going, wow, I wish I could be her. She's amazing. I could never be like that. But we actually do have more power within us, and it is those small acts, and courage is contagious. It'll make a difference. We can make a difference.
Thank you.
In order, I guess. Okay. So I think what we can do is we are in the marketing world, in the advertising world, and when we are in the advertising world, we are constantly, all the time, in people's lives. We are in the living room with television, we are on people's phones, we are on people's iPads, we are on with people all the time. So we can have a lot of impact. I think we can have an impact in multiple ways. In the content, but the content that gets people really uncomfortable, start a conversation, start challenging each other. You have to go far so that you can get a little bit more. So we need to get that conversation really far to sometimes really get the conversation going. And the way we penetrate into people's lives and we are exposed, we can definitely do it. The other way is, again, in the content. In the content, we should always show the things the way they should be. And we shouldn't show the old stereotypes, and we should show the way we think is right, the way that we think the value system should be, so that people are exposed to that. That is what we really can do with content. I mean, we have 65 brands in the world, and we are the world's biggest spender right now. We have a responsibility to do that, to be in the right way in people's daily lives, day in, day out. And then, as an industry, our scale would be so much when there are all these people wanting to do the same thing. With that scale, we can really change the day in, day out perception of how we portray women out there. And then there is our back office. There is our home. There is our home, our own shop in the company, the way we care people, the way we make people go up the ladder, the people that we have as women, and how we treat them, how we bring them, how we build a career for them. That is the way we are responsible of our home. And then there is the responsibility that we have for the economy. We have suppliers, we have distributors. Distributors tend to be men. If you look at IMEA, APAC, some of the Eastern European markets where there are a lot of distributors, we should go and find more women who are distributors. The best distributor I worked with in IMEA in Nigeria actually was a woman. So we need to go back, and we need to also help the economy and our system. That includes everyone from a supplier to a director to the person who does the creative, because then the details will improve. We are going to go much more into the talent pool. Therefore, it is going to be good for economies in our business, and it is going to be good for the women all around. We have a lot of responsibility, and I think we are in the right places to do that.
I would just add to all of these points is to, we do a pretty good job of complaining when things go wrong as a world, is really rewarding the people who are doing well, asking the questions, as T said, and then rewarding those businesses in the areas that you live in your daily lives, and reward them. From a TV perspective, we have a great show that we love. It's called Black Girls Rock, and it salutes amazing women who've done amazing things. We've had Michelle Obama on the show. We've had anyone from Cynthia Erivo. You can just go down all the line of the amazing women. One day we had this show on against another show on another network that had some women, let's just say, behaving badly. And that show did much better in the ratings. And we kind of all scratched our heads and said, wow, we are literally rewarding bad behavior. But if we took this show off the air, people would be like, how could you take the show off the air? I love it. I'm like, well, you love it, but you're not watching it. So I think what we need to vote with our pocketbooks, we vote with our channels, we vote with our voices. And when a brand is doing, I'm going to go get a Venus shaver, I'm doing it tonight. So when you hear about a brand and you know that the values are in your space and you have that opportunity, and I think those are also the opportunity for social media, that all of our brands are listening to every single word you say in a really uncomfortable way. But that is how we get ideas, and that's how we know what works, and that's how our employees tell us what's happening. So that is another important tool, that if there's a brand that's doing something, like, shout it out. Let them know that you think that it's good, because what will happen is you'll begin to see more of what you like. So.
Great. Thank you. And I think just on that note, you had mentioned Nike's stock going down the day after the ad came out. What ended up happening is, over the next 30 days, Nike had its highest online sales ever. So people voted on their computer, they voted with their pocketbook, and they showed the brand and they showed the company what they felt about the ad. So I think, as all of you have said, that's the best way to communicate our support for brands who are taking risk and demonstrating and showing us, women, young girls, in a positive way. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're going to take a few questions from the audience. Sophie, do we have microphones out? So if anybody has any questions, if you could just raise your hand or stand up, and we'll have somebody bring you a microphone.
Hi everyone, my name is Peggy from Canada. I'm here with Girls 20. I'm wondering if you could all comment on brands who use media to promote progressive values, and what happens when those values aren't reflected in internal practices. So for example, there is a global fashion retailer who had put out a campaign about female empowerment and positive body image, yet when you look at their factory conditions of their workers, who are usually female, they're in very poor working conditions and often experience harassment or assault. So how can this build trust with consumers?
I'm going to have just one panelist respond, just with time, so we can get in.
It's a very difficult question. It's like integrity and authenticity is probably the most important thing your brand can have. And if you can demonstrate that that's not the case, then, or if your consumers can see that that's not the case, then you have a fundamental problem. You don't have inclusion without a culture of inclusion. You don't have creativity without a culture of creativity. These are not things that you can just make true. I'm very lucky that I work at Google, which is an extraordinarily inclusive process. We recently demonstrated that if we don't agree with something that's happened, we will make our voices heard internally. And that's important, not because Google has a particular harassment problem. Everyone in the world has a harassment problem. But because we were empowered within our organization to say, this is not the culture that we want better. And I think that comes back to that point about stakeholders, about shareholders, about how you vote with your Twitter account, or how you make your voice heard, which is that it is through that action. So ideally consumers don't reward that behavior, but that is on the individual. It really is. We can't make everyone do that. Does that help?
I would actually say one thing. So you have watched the advertising, but you also know about the behavior, right? So in today's social media, I think the real back office, no one can hide it. So that definitely now, in my mind, goes into false advertising. And as many people will know the reality, because in today's world, the way the information is spreading out, there is no way to hide what really happens right now. So then people will label it as false advertising because they are going to hear about it the way you have heard about it. So I think it is a dead end.
Thank you. We have one more? No. Sophie says no. I'm being told we are done. Well, thank you very much. This was wonderful. We could have had this conversation go on, but I appreciate your contribution. Thank you.